My sister drugged my fiancé and faked a pregnancy to destroy our wedding. It was a calculated, cruel act designed to ruin me. But she had no idea about my own secret, the fact that I was the one who had been secretly paying for her entire life for the last 5 years. So, in front of our entire family, I exposed everything, and I cut her off completely. What followed was a reckoning that changed all of us forever. Hello everyone. Before we get into the whole messy, unbelievable truth of it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Let me know in the comments. Seeing your cities, knowing you're out there, it helps. It really does. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Growing up, my sister Corinne and I lived in the same house, but we grew up in 2 different worlds. She was 4 years younger, a gap that my parents treated like a chasm. In our family's unspoken constitution, Corinne was the princess, and I was the prime minister. Her job was to be loved, my job was to be responsible. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. I had wanted this delicate silver locket from a local jewelry store for months. It wasn't expensive, but to me, it was everything. My parents gave it to me, and I felt, for a fleeting moment, seen. That afternoon, Corinne, who was 6, saw it and immediately wanted it. When I said no, a tantrum of epic proportions ensued. It was screaming, crying, throwing herself on the floor. My father knelt down, not to discipline her, but to reason with me. "Audrey, she's just little," he'd said, his voice weary. "Just let her wear it for a bit. Be the bigger person." My mother nodded in agreement. "You're the older sister," she added. "You need to set an example." I handed over the locket. Corinne wore it for a week, broke the chain, and lost the pendant in the backyard. It was never mentioned again. But I never forgot. That was the lesson of my childhood. My achievements were negotiable, my feelings were secondary, and my role was to yield. So, I channeled that quiet injustice into the one thing I could control, my work. While Corinne was learning how to get what she wanted with a well-timed tear, I was learning how to build a life she couldn't touch. I aced my classes, joined the debate team, and spent my summers in internships while she was at camp. Praise in our house had to be earned, so I decided to earn so much they couldn't possibly ignore it. They still found a way. I got a full scholarship to an Ivy League university. It was my golden ticket. I remember calling them, my voice shaking with excitement. "That's nice, honey," my mom had said, her voice distracted. "Listen, can I call you back? Corinne just failed her driver's test again and she's inconsolable." My college graduation was the same story, just on a grander scale. I stood there in my cap and gown, a degree in computer science and business in my hand, a symbol of 4 years of sleepless nights and relentless effort. My parents were there, smiling for the cameras. But at the celebratory lunch afterward, the conversation wasn't about my job offer or my thesis. It was about Corinne's struggles with her college applications. My father spent 20 minutes dissecting her entrance essay with her over the phone, while my own, very real achievement sat getting cold on the table between us. After graduation, I moved across the country and poured myself into a small tech startup. The work was my refuge. It was logical, it was fair. Your success was directly proportional to your effort. The hours were brutal. I practically lived at the office, fueled by stale coffee and the burning desire to build something that was undeniably mine. There were nights I slept on a beanbag chair under my desk, the glow of the monitor my only light. By 28, our little startup was acquired by a tech giant in a deal that made headlines. I walked away with a net worth that was, frankly, staggering. My life was finally, completely, my own. I had built it from the ground up, brick by painful brick. And I naively thought I had finally escaped the gravitational pull of my family's dysfunction. Life has a way of laughing at your plans. Just as I was learning to navigate my new reality of financial freedom, my parents' world was imploding. Their small retail store, a fixture in their town for 20 years, was dying a slow, painful death. A combination of the 2008 recession, the rise of online shopping, and some poor inventory decisions had left them drowning in debt. My father, a man whose identity was inextricably linked to being a provider and a business owner, was too proud to tell me the full extent of the problem. I found out from my mother. She called me one Tuesday night, and the carefully constructed wall of maternal competence she always maintained just crumbled. She was sobbing, a raw, terrified sound I'd never heard from her before. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage, the credit cards were maxed out, and the bank was using words like foreclosure. The familiar weight settled onto my shoulders. The Prime Minister was being summoned. It was my job to fix it. That night, sitting alone in my quiet, minimalist apartment, I made a decision that would secretly redefine our family for the next 5 years. I would become their savior, but I would do it as a ghost. My motives weren't entirely pure. Of course, I wanted to protect them from the humiliation of failure. But a larger, colder part of me was protecting myself. I couldn't let Corinne know about the money. Her jealousy was a living thing, an insidious vine that would wrap itself around my success and choke it. If she knew the extent of my wealth, I would never have a moment's peace. I would become the family bank, and every dollar I gave would be twisted into another reason to resent me. The next day, I was in my financial advisor's office. Thomas was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his late 50s. I laid out the plan. I want to support them anonymously, I said. Completely untraceable. I want to pay their mortgage, clear their debt, and fund my sister's education without them ever knowing it's me. Thomas leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. Audrey, he said, his voice calm and serious. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen these kinds of family entanglements play out dozens of times. It rarely ends well. It starts with a mortgage, then it's a car, then it's a loan that's never repaid. It creates dependency, not gratitude. Are you absolutely sure about this? I'm sure, I said, my voice firm. This is the only way. He sighed, but he was brilliant. He engineered a masterpiece of financial deception. We created a series of shell companies and trusts, a labyrinth of legal entities that insulated me from my own money. We established a trust in the name of a long-dead great-uncle, which would provide a small inheritance. For Corinne, we created the Northwood Alumni Foundation, a completely fictitious scholarship fund. For my parents, a community business revitalization grant that, by sheer coincidence, would select their store as its first recipient. The letters started arriving at their house. Official-looking envelopes containing miracles. A mortgage refinancing that cut their payment by more than half. A grant that cleared their business debt. A full-ride scholarship for Corinne that included tuition, a luxury apartment near campus, and a monthly stipend that was more than most people's starting salary. The relief in my mother's voice over the phone was palpable. The stress melted away from them. Corinne was ecstatic, preening about being chosen for such a prestigious scholarship. Their gratitude was immense, but it was directed at faceless institutions and a benevolent universe. Never at me. And for a while, that felt like a victory. I was their guardian angel, their silent benefactor. I thought I had found the perfect solution, a way to love my family from a safe, sterile distance. I was a fool. I wasn't building a safety net, I was constructing a gilded cage, and the door was about to slam shut on all of us. For the first year, my secret arrangement worked like a charm. My parents' business stabilized, and they settled into a comfortable, stress-free life they believed they had earned through a stroke of good luck. Corinne lived like a queen, her Instagram filled with photos of brunches, shopping sprees, and weekend trips, all paid for by the foundation that was, in reality, the Audrey Preston Benevolent Fund. The illusion began to fray the day I brought Grant home for Thanksgiving. Grant was my quiet rebellion. He was successful on his own terms, an architect who built beautiful, functional spaces. More than that, he was kind. He listened. He saw me, the real me, not the role I played for my family. The moment Corinne met him, I felt a familiar shift in the atmosphere. It was like the pressure in the room suddenly changed. Her casual friendliness sharpened into a focused, predatory charm. Her laugh was a little too loud when he told a joke. Her hand lingered on his arm for a fraction of a second too long. "Oh, Grant, you're an architect? That's so fascinating," she gushed over dinner. "I've always been drawn to creative men. It's so hard to find someone with real passion, you know?" She shot him a look from under her lashes that was anything but sisterly. I sat there, gripping my fork, a tight, hot knot forming in my stomach. I wanted to scream, to tell her to back off, but I did what I always did. I said nothing. I smiled, played the part of the happy fiancé, and let the poison hang in the air. "Your sister's very energetic," Grant said later, choosing his words carefully. He hadn't missed it entirely, but his good nature made him want to dismiss it. I just nodded, not wanting to be the jealous sister. But her actions after that became impossible to ignore. The scholarship reports I received showed a girl who was spiraling. She dropped most of her classes, coasting on the bare minimum to maintain her student status. She cycled through boyfriends and jobs with alarming speed, each breakup or firing followed by a flurry of extravagant retail therapy purchases, all funded by me. Then came the first of many panicked phone calls from my mother. "Audrey, honey, it's about Corinne. She's maxed out her credit card again, and the interest rates are just criminal. We helped her with what we could, but with the store." The subtext was clear. It was my turn to step up. I played my part beautifully. "Of course, Mom. Let me see what I can do. I can probably spare a few hundred." Then I'd hang up and call Thomas. "Clear the full balance on this card," I'd instruct him. It happened again 6 months later, and then again. Each time, I was reinforcing the lesson of her childhood: no matter how irresponsible she was, someone else would always be there to clean up the mess. I was so busy being the fixer, the secret provider, that I failed to see I wasn't fixing anything. I was just enabling the monster that was about to devour my life. To understand the full scope of what Corinne did, we have to go back 3 months before the wedding, to my 30th birthday party. Grant and I hosted it at our house. It was one of those rare, perfect nights. All our friends were there, the music was great, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely, utterly happy. I drank too much champagne, I danced with Grant in the living room, and I felt a deep, soul-settling sense of peace. My life was finally on the right track. Corinne was in her element, playing the part of the doting younger sister. She was constantly at my side, making sure my glass was never empty, telling everyone how proud she was of me. It was a flawless performance. The end of the night is hazy in my memory. I remember Grant helping me upstairs, me collapsing into bed in a happy, drunken heap. What I didn't know is that after I was asleep, Corinne went back downstairs. And she wasn't done playing hostess. The full, sickening story came from Grant months later, in a confession punctuated by ragged sobs. He said he'd been on the couch, feeling dizzy and disoriented. He thought he'd just had too much to drink. Corinne came over, all concerned, saying he looked pale. She insisted he go lie down in the guest room for a few minutes. She helped him up, her arm around his waist. He remembered the room spinning, a strange, chemical taste in the back of his throat. He woke up hours later, with a splitting headache and a gut-wrenching sense of dread. The sun was coming up. And Corinne was in the bed next to him. He told me he scrambled out of the bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. He confronted her, his voice a choked whisper. "What did you do? What happened?" She didn't feign innocence. She sat up, cool and composed, and laid out her terms. She told him she had done it because they were meant to be together. She told him he had to break up with me. "You are going to end it with Audrey," she had said, her voice devoid of emotion. "And you are going to be with me. If you don't, I will go to her and I will tell her you got drunk and cheated on her in her own house on her birthday." Who do you think she'll believe, Grant? Me, her devoted little sister, or you? He was trapped in a nightmare. He was a good man who had been put in an impossible situation. He knew me. He knew my history with Corinne. He knew that the truth, twisted by her, would destroy me. So he made a catastrophic mistake. He chose to protect me by lying. He told Corinne to get out, that he would never leave me, but the threat was now hanging over his head. His silence was a poison that seeped into our relationship. He became distant, anxious. I thought it was just pre-wedding jitters. But Corinne had him on a leash. She would text him, threatening to tell me if he didn't meet her. He admitted he met her twice, both times in the crowded coffee shop of a downtown hotel, where he begged her to leave us alone. He swore on his life that's all that happened, that he was just desperately trying to contain the fallout. He didn't understand he wasn't dealing with a rational person. He was dealing with a saboteur who had just acquired her bomb. And my wedding was the target. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, our lives became a stage for Corinne's escalating campaign of psychological warfare. Every interaction, every planning detail, became an opportunity for her to create chaos while playing the victim. First, it was the small things. I had a crucial appointment with our wedding photographer, a man whose schedule was booked a year in advance. I showed up, only to be told the appointment had been cancelled. "Your sister called yesterday," the receptionist said, showing me the notes. "She said you had a family emergency." When I called Corinne, she was all breathless apologies. "Oh my God, I completely forgot to tell you. Mom was having a panic attack about the catering, and I must have gotten my wires crossed. It was so chaotic." It was a lie, but it was just plausible enough to make me doubt my own sanity. Then, the sabotage became more direct. The $5,000 deposit for our venue went missing. I had given Corinne the certified check to deliver. She claimed she'd dropped it off. The venue swore they never received it. A week of frantic calls followed, with Corinne playing the part of the helpful sister, investigating the mix-up. The truth, which I uncovered later through bank records, was that she had used a mobile deposit app to put the check into her own account and used the money as a down payment on a new luxury car. When I finally confronted her with the undeniable proof, she didn't even flinch. "It was a simple mistake, Audrey. I was going to transfer it to them this week. You need to stop being such a control freak." She made me feel like I was the crazy one for being upset. All the while, Grant was a ghost of himself. He was quiet, withdrawn, and flinched whenever Corinne's name was mentioned. I begged him to tell me what was wrong. He just shook his head, blaming it on the stress of a big project at work. The secret was eating him alive, and I was too busy managing my sister to see the real damage she was inflicting on my relationship. Then, Corinne launched the centerpiece of her plan, the phantom pregnancy. It started subtly. A sigh at dinner. A hand resting on her stomach. Vague complaints of fatigue. "I don't want to worry anyone," she'd say, "but I've just been feeling off lately." My mother, of course, took the bait immediately, fussing over her, insisting she see a doctor. The performance reached a crescendo at the bridesmaid dress fitting. After trying on her dress, she came out of the dressing room with tears in her eyes. I think I might need a bigger size," she announced to the room. The seamstress, a practical woman named Maria, started talking about alterations. Corinne cut her off, her voice trembling. "No, you don't understand," she whispered, loud enough for every bridesmaid to hear. "There might be a reason I need a little extra room in a few months." The room erupted. Squeals, questions, congratulations. Corinne held up a hand, looking tragic and brave. "It's too early to say anything for sure. And I don't want to steal Audrey's thunder. This is her time." But her eyes, cold and triumphant, met mine in the mirror. She was enjoying this, every second of it. She wasn't just stealing my thunder. She was orchestrating a hurricane. My gut was screaming at me. This wasn't just Corinne being dramatic. This was calculated. This was a hostile takeover of my wedding. I had spent years being the bigger person, the responsible one. Not anymore. If she was declaring war, I was going to arm myself for battle. My first move was to become a detective in the empire I had secretly built. As the anonymous head of this scholarship foundation, I had access to her financial records. I started digging. And what I found made my blood run cold. There were no charges from an OBGYN. No payments for prenatal vitamins. Instead, I found a string of bizarre purchases, multiple visits to a generic walk-in clinic, payments to a medical supply store for items that made no sense, and the smoking gun, a $50 charge to a website called https://www.google.com/search?q=fake-a-doc.com, a service that specialized in creating novelty diplomas, doctor's notes, and, yes, sonogram images. The dread was a physical thing, a cold weight in my chest. I knew she was planning something for the rehearsal dinner. It was the perfect stage, our closest friends and family, all gathered together. I had to know exactly what her plan was. I needed to see her phone. The rehearsal dinner was at the Belmont, an elegant restaurant with a private dining room. The room was beautiful, filled with flowers and laughter, but to me, it felt like a pressure cooker. I watched Corinne all night. She was the star of her own tragic play, sighing, rubbing her stomach, accepting concerned pats on the arm. She was glued to her phone, a smug little smile playing on her lips. I waited. For nearly 2 hours, I watched her, my patience stretched to its breaking point. Finally, she put her phone face down on the table next to her purse and excused herself to go to the restroom. This was it. I had minutes, maybe seconds. My heart was hammering against my ribs as I walked calmly across the room to her empty seat. My hands were shaking. I felt a surge of shame. What kind of person goes through their sister's phone? But the shame was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I picked it up. It was unlocked. Her text conversation with her friend Brenda was right on the screen. I started reading, and the floor seemed to drop out from under me. Brenda, the fake sonogram picture is perfect. Doctor's office letterhead and everything. Are you really going through with this? Corinne, hell yes. Announcement tonight. Then complications during the ceremony tomorrow. I'm going to faint right when she says I do. All eyes on me. Not Miss Perfect. Brenda, Jesus, Corey. What if someone calls the doctor to check? Corinne, no one would dare. It's a tragedy. Besides, I'll have a miscarriage a week after the honeymoon. The timing is perfect. It'll ruin their return to reality. She'll get over it. She has everything else. I deserve one day where people actually care about me. I couldn't breathe. It was a script. A detailed, malicious script for the complete and utter destruction of the most important day of my life. I kept scrolling, my vision blurring. There were photos of the forged doctor's report, complete with a realistic-looking signature. There was the fake sonogram, a generic, grainy image she had probably downloaded from the internet. With trembling fingers, I took photos of the entire conversation with my own phone, capturing every sick, twisted word. I placed her phone back on the table, face down, exactly as I'd found it, just as I saw her coming back down the hall. Our eyes met for a split second across the room. I held my expression perfectly neutral, but she must have seen something in my gaze, the calm before a Category 5 hurricane. A flicker of panic crossed her face. She knew something was wrong. But she had no idea how wrong it was about to get for her. Dinner was an out-of-body experience. I moved my food around my plate, smiled at guests, and nodded along to conversations, all while a storm of pure, cold fury raged inside me. I felt eerily calm. The years of swallowing my anger, of being the bigger person, were over. Tonight, the Prime Minister was staging a coup. As dessert and coffee were served, my father stood, tapping his glass for attention. He beamed, a proud father about to toast his accomplished daughter. "I'd like to say a few words," he began, "about my daughter, Audrey, and the wonderful man she's about to marry." He never finished. Right on cue, Corinne let out a sharp gasp. She pressed a hand to her stomach, her face contorting in practiced pain. Every head in the room swiveled toward her. The timing was flawless, a perfectly executed assassination of my moment. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice a trembling whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the silent room. "Dad, please, continue." "I didn't mean to interrupt." She paused, gathering her strength, every eye glued to her. "I wasn't going to say anything this weekend. I didn't want to take a single moment of attention away from Audrey and Grant, but..." She let a single, perfect tear trace a path down her cheek. I've been having some complications with my pregnancy. The doctor said I need to be on complete bed rest, but I couldn't bear to miss this. I had to be here for my sister." The room dissolved into a symphony of concerned murmurs and gasps. My mother rushed to her side, cooing and stroking her hair. My father stood there, holding his champagne glass, his speech forgotten. Grant looked at me, his face pale, trapped between the lie he knew and the secret he was keeping. This was my moment. I stood up slowly, deliberately, my own wine glass in my hand. The murmurs died down as people noticed me. A new act was beginning. "Thank you, everyone," I said, my voice resonating with a calm authority that silenced the room completely. "Thank you for your concern for my sister." I turned my head and locked eyes with her. "But before we all panic, I think we should clarify something." I paused, letting the tension build. "Corinne, would you like to tell everyone the truth about your so-called pregnancy? Or should I?" Her face went from tragic to white with shock. She tried to recover, to play the victim one last time. "Audrey, I know you're stressed, but this is cruel. This isn't about you for once." "You're absolutely right, Corinne," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "It isn't about me. It's about you, standing there and lying to the faces of 40 people who love you." I let the accusation hang in the air. "There is no pregnancy, is there? There is no baby. There never was." "How dare you," she spat, her voice rising. "Why on earth would I lie about something so sacred?" "To ruin my wedding," I said, the words like chips of ice. "According to your detailed text messages with Brenda." I held up my phone, angled so the head table could see the screen, displaying her own treacherous words in bright, vivid color. The fake sonogram from https://www.google.com/search?q=fake-a-doc.com was a nice touch, though. And the forged doctor's report? Very convincing letterhead. "You always were creative." The mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Her face, stripped of its practiced victimhood, was a gargoyle of pure rage. "You went through my phone?" she shrieked. "That's a new low, even for you, Audrey. Always so perfect, so righteous." "Well, at least I'm not a pathetic, controlling freak who can't stand it when someone else gets a shred of attention." It was the perfect segue. The final trapdoor she had just stepped on. "You want to talk about control?" I asked, my voice dropping to a quiet, lethal level. I reached into my purse and pulled out the thick manila folder I'd brought. I placed it on the white linen tablecloth. The soft thud echoed in the dead silent room. I looked directly at my sister. "Let's talk about control, Corinne. Did you ever wonder how you could afford a $2,000 a month luxury apartment while working 20 hours a week at a bookstore? Or how you managed to buy a brand new car with no credit history?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Confusion was warring with her rage. I turned my gaze to my parents. They were looking back and forth between us, completely lost. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice softening slightly, but still firm. Do you remember 5 years ago, when the store was about to go under and you were months away from foreclosure? Do you remember the community business revitalization grant that came out of nowhere and saved everything? Do you remember the inheritance from great Uncle Arthur that just happened to cover all your debts? My father's face was ashen. My mother just stared at me, her hand over her mouth. I opened the folder. I'm going to tell you all a secret now. A real one. I started sliding documents onto the table, one by one. Bank statements. Incorporation papers. Trust agreements. Deeds. The Northwood Alumni Foundation that gave Corinne her full-ride scholarship? I slid a document forward. I incorporated it 6 years ago. I am the sole donor. The business grant that saved the store? It came from a shell company that I own. The inheritance? I pushed another paper forward. That was a trust one funded myself. I saved the final blow for last. I looked at my father. This one, I said, pointing to a deed of trust, is for your house. The mortgage wasn't refinanced. I bought the note from the bank. The company you've been sending your mortgage payments to for the last 5 years. I own it. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper that everyone in the room could hear. For 5 years, I have paid for everything. Your house. Your cars. Your health insurance. Your vacations. I looked at Corinne, whose face had crumpled in utter disbelief and horror. And your entire life. Every brunch, every shopping spree, every irresponsible decision, paid for by the pathetic, controlling freak who just wanted her family to be okay. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of an entire family's reality imploding. Grant was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. My mother was openly weeping. My father looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. Corinne just whispered one word, over and over. No, no, no. I stood up, my composure absolute. The pregnancy report isn't the only fake document here tonight, Corinne, I said. The difference is, my lies were meant to hold this family together. Yours were meant to tear it apart. I looked out at our shocked guests. I am so deeply sorry you all had to witness this. Please, enjoy your dessert. As for the wedding, I glanced at Grant. I guess we'll have to see. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving my family to drown in the truth. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and shadows. I put on the radio to drown out the silence, but I couldn't hear the music over the roaring in my ears. The adrenaline from the confrontation was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching exhaustion. I had detonated a bomb in the middle of my own life, and now I was standing in the crater, covered in the dust of the explosion. I had won. I had exposed every lie. So why did it feel like I had burned my own life to the ground? When I pulled into the driveway, Grant's car was there. He was sitting on the porch swing, just a dark shape in the twilight. A part of me wanted to turn the car around and just keep driving. But I was done running. I walked up the steps and sat on the other end of the swing, the space between us feeling like a canyon. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was the chirping of crickets. Finally, my voice came out, flat and empty. Did you know? He shook his head, not looking at me. About the money, Audrey, I swear, I had no idea. I'm just as stunned as you are. I waited. The silence stretched again. But the rest of it, he finally choked out, his voice thick with shame. Her obsession. Her trying to get to me. I knew about that. And then, the final wall of my world came crashing down. In a torrent of guilt and self-loathing, he told me everything. He told me about my 30th birthday party. About Corinne keeping his glass full, about the strange, foggy feeling, about waking up in the guest room in a cold panic. He told me about her chilling ultimatum the next morning. how she had laid out her plan to either have him or destroy him. He told me how he had chosen to lie, thinking he was protecting me from a truth he was sure would break me. He described the blackmail, the threatening texts, the 2 agonizing meetings in a public hotel coffee shop where he begged a cold, unmoving Corinne to just leave us alone. "I was a coward, Audrey," he finally whispered, the words seeming to tear him apart as he said them. He slid off the swing and knelt on the porch floor in front of me, his face buried in his hands. Sobs racked his body. "I was so terrified of losing you, of what she would do to you, that I let her have that power. I thought I was protecting you from the pain, but I just let it fester. I lied to you. Every day. And that's unforgivable." I listened to his confession, to every painful detail. I looked down at the man I loved, the man I was supposed to build a life with, kneeling and broken at my feet. And the strangest thing happened. I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The hurt was a distant echo. All that was left was a quiet, desolate emptiness. My sister had put the knife in my back, but my fiancé, the man who was supposed to protect my heart, had stood there and politely held the door open for her. And as I stared at him, I realized the truth. My family hadn't just been broken tonight. It had been a sham all along. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. That way I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know you're on this journey with me. Your support is a huge encouragement and keeps me going. Please, comment with a number 1 and then listen to the rest of my story. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My body ached with a bone-deep weariness. My phone, which I'd shut off, had dozens of missed calls and texts. I ignored them all until I saw one from my father. "We need to talk. As a family. Everyone's at the house. Please come." A part of me wanted to refuse, to just cut them all out of my life right then and there. But another part knew this was necessary. This was the final, messy chapter that had to be written before I could close the book. Walking back into my parents' living room felt surreal. It was the same room I'd grown up in, but it felt alien. The air was thick with the stench of unspoken resentment and fresh grief. My mother's eyes were red and puffy. My father looked gaunt. Corinne was huddled on the armchair, wrapped in a blanket, looking like a frightened child. "We just want to understand, Audrey," my father began, his voice hoarse. So I told them everything again, but this time, without the audience, without the adrenaline. I just laid out the cold, hard facts of the last 5 years. "Why didn't you just tell us you had money?" my mother cried. "We would have been so proud." "Would you have been?" I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. "Or would my success have just become another thing to compare Corinne to? Would you have been proud, or would you have seen me as an obligation? A resource? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you only started seeing my value when you thought the money might disappear." My words hit their mark. My mother flinched as if struck. The focus then turned to Corinne. My father asked her, his voice trembling with a rage I had never heard from him before, "Is it true? All of it? The fake pregnancy? The plan to ruin the wedding?" Corinne just nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. "Why?" he demanded. "Why would you do that to your own sister?" That's when she finally broke. "Because I hate her," she screamed, the words ripping from her throat. "I hate her because she's perfect. She has the perfect career, the perfect fiancé, the perfect life that she built all by herself. And what am I? I'm the family joke. The pretty, stupid one who can't do anything right. Everyone thinks I was the favorite, but being the favorite meant no one ever pushed me, no one ever expected anything from me. Do you have any idea what it's like to know that the only thing you're good at is being charming? And then to find out that your entire pathetic life is being paid for by the one person you resent more than anyone else in the world?" Her confession, in all its ugly, raw honesty, hung in the air. For the first time, I didn't see a villain. I saw a deeply broken person who had been twisted by the same toxic family dynamic that had forged me into steel. My father sank into his chair, covering his face with his hands. "We failed you both," he whispered. "We made one of you grow up too fast, and we never let the other one grow up at all." My mother looked at me, her eyes pleading. "What happens now, Audrey? What do we do?" I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was cutting my lungs. "The wedding is off," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Grant and we have to figure out if there's anything left. And the money," I looked at each of them, my gaze unwavering, "is gone. It stops. Today. All of it." My mother started to protest, but the house, the bills. "The house will have to be sold," I said, my voice flat. "The bills will have to be paid by you. You have 2 months of runway from the accounts I funded. After that, you're on your own. Corinne, your lease is up at the end of the month. You need to find a job and a new place to live." "You can't do this to us," my mother whispered. "I'm not doing this to you," I said, standing up to leave. "I'm doing this for you. This family, in its current state, is an illusion. It's time we all woke up and faced reality." The weeks that followed were a quiet, brutal education in reality for my family. The illusion I had so carefully constructed for 5 years evaporated, leaving them exposed and unprepared. I kept my distance, needing to build my own raft before I could even think about throwing them a life preserver. My primary focus was Grant. We didn't break up. Instead, we entered a kind of limbo. We started intense couples counseling, twice a week. Our first sessions were agonizing. There were long, painful silences, punctuated by my blunt, angry questions and his quiet, shame-filled answers. He never made excuses. He owned his cowardice, his lies, his failure to protect me and our relationship. I also started my own individual therapy, trying to untangle the complex knot of grief, anger, and a lifetime of conditioned responsibility. I heard about my family through the grapevine. My cousin Sarah, the one who had called me cruel, called again a month later, her tone different. "Your parents are having a yard sale this weekend," she said, a note of disbelief in her voice. "Your dad is selling his golf clubs." The image was so jarring it almost made me laugh. My father, who lived for his Sunday golf game, was selling his prized possessions. The message was clear, this was real. Sarah told me my mother was trying to figure out how to sell her handcrafted jewelry on Etsy. She told me Corinne had moved out of her luxury apartment and into a tiny room she was renting from a friend. She had gotten a job, a real, 40-hour-a-week job as a receptionist at a dental office. The work was boring, the pay was minimum wage, but she was doing it. She was paying her own bills for the first time in her life. There was a strange, detached part of me that felt a grim satisfaction. This was the consequence. This was the necessary, painful medicine. But another part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 30 years to be the fixer, felt an overwhelming urge to sweep in and make it all better. My therapist helped me fight that urge. "Audrey," she said in one session, "you've spent your entire life managing your family's feelings and finances. Your only job right now is to manage your own. Their journey is their own. You have to let them walk it." So I did. I focused on my therapy. I focused on the fragile, tentative process of rebuilding with Grant. He was doing the work. He was patient. He understood that my trust was a distant shore he might never reach, but he was willing to swim toward it every single day. For the first time, our family was not a single, dysfunctional unit. It was 4 separate individuals, all learning, painfully and slowly, how to walk on our own. Rebuilding is quiet work. It doesn't happen in dramatic confrontations, it happens in small, awkward, and courageous moments. About 6 weeks after I had cut them off, I agreed to meet my parents for lunch. They chose a humble little diner. They looked tired, but also lighter. "We've put the house on the market," my father announced after we ordered. "We found a small condo we can actually afford on our own. Your mother is surprisingly good at this Etsy thing." He looked at me, his eyes clear for the first time in years. "We owe you an apology, Audrey. For taking you for granted. For putting the weight of the world on your shoulders and then being surprised when you got strong enough to shrug it off. We see that now." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. A few months after that, my parents and Corinne's family therapist reached out to me. They had been in consistent therapy, and the therapist thought a joint session might be productive, if I was willing. I was terrified, but with the encouragement of Grant and my own therapist, I agreed. Walking into that room felt like stepping into a cage with two wounded animals. But the session was transformative. Corinne, stripped of her usual defenses, was almost unrecognizable. She spoke about her lifelong feelings of inadequacy, about the crushing pressure of being the charming one with no real substance. At one point, she looked directly at me, her eyes filled with a sorrow so profound it startled me. "I'm sorry, Audrey," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for what I did to you and Grant. It was evil. I was so lost in my own self-pity that I wanted to burn your life down just to feel warm for a minute." She took a shaky breath. "I wasn't jealous of your money. I was jealous of you. You always knew who you were. You built your own life. I never built anything. I just took." In that moment, for the first time, I didn't see my rival or my tormentor. I just saw my sister. A broken, flawed human being who was finally, desperately, trying to find her way. The ice around my heart, the hard, protective shell I had built over 30 years, began to melt. The path forward wasn't easy. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a choice you make every day. Grant and I continued our counseling. We were learning a new way to be together, a way that was built on radical honesty. He knew he had a long way to go, but he was steady, he was consistent, and he never wavered in his commitment to earning back my trust. We were slowly, cautiously, finding our way back to each other. 1 year to the day after the rehearsal dinner that blew our lives apart, Grant and I got married. It wasn't the 200-guest affair at a fancy hotel. It was a simple ceremony on a windswept beach at sunset, with 40 of our truest friends and family. The air was salty and cool. The sound of the waves was our music. My parents were there. They had sold the big house and were living in their condo. My father had taken a part-time consulting job, and my mother's Etsy store was actually turning a small profit. They looked content. They looked free. Corinne was there, too. She wasn't a bridesmaid, we weren't there yet. But I had invited her, and she had come. She was working full-time and taking night classes, slowly chipping away at the business degree she had abandoned years ago. She looked different, less polished, but more real. The ceremony was short and heartfelt. Grant and I read vows we had written ourselves, vows that spoke of honesty, forgiveness, and the hard work of building a life together, especially after it has been broken. As he slid the ring on my finger, I felt a sense of rightness, a deep and profound peace that had been absent from our original, grandiose plans. At the small, casual reception at a local seafood restaurant, Corinne approached me. She was holding a simple, unadorned envelope. "This isn't a wedding gift, exactly," she said, her voice a little shaky. "But I wanted you to have it." I opened it. Inside wasn't a card, but a 10-page document. It was a meticulously researched, professionally presented business plan for a small graphic design company she wanted to launch after she graduated. "I'm not asking for money," she clarified quickly, her cheeks flushing. I wanted your opinion. As someone who built something. As my sister." Tears pricked my eyes. It was the most valuable gift she could have ever given me. It was a gesture of respect. A request for connection, not a handout. I'd love to read it, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Maybe we can get coffee next week and go over it together. Her face lit up with a smile so genuine and full of relief that it took my breath away. I'd really like that, she said. Later in the evening, she stood up and asked to make a toast. She spoke about our childhood, about her jealousy, about the roles we had been forced to play. What I've realized over this past year, she said, raising her glass and looking directly at me, is that Audrey's success didn't take anything away from me. Her light doesn't diminish mine. It can help me find my own path. I looked around the room, at my husband, whose love I was choosing to trust again, at my parents, who were finally learning to be partners, and at my sister, who was finally learning to be her own person. Our family was still a messy, complicated work in progress. But for the first time in our lives, it was built on a foundation of truth. The fire had burned everything down, but in the ashes, something new and unexpectedly beautiful was beginning to grow. Thank you. Thank you for staying with me through all of that. Sharing this hasn't been easy, but it feels important. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever dealt with complicated family dynamics of your own, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me know that I'm not alone in these experiences, and neither are you. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that ended up transforming your relationships? Sometimes, knowing we're not alone is the most healing thing of all. Remember, sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the beginning of something much, much better. Thank you for listening.